Hi, it's Grandma with another story. Today our story is about a grandpa, and I want to tell you just a little bit about it before I start. The story is, first of all, it's called Georgie Finds a Grandpa. That sounds like a nice story, doesn't it? You can see a grandpa's head, and you can see a happy little boy they're hugging each other. Grandpa and little boy, and the little boy is Georgie. And what I wanted to tell you, this is a little golden book, and it used to belong to my oldest brother. And it's kind of fun to think about it because it was written in 1954, so before I was born, but my brother was a little tiny boy. And I was reading about it, and the author wrote a lot of golden books. Her name is Miriam Young, and the pictures are by Eloise Wilkin. And that name could be familiar because she is the illustrator or picture lady of a lot of golden books. And one of them that I know is familiar to Willa is Baby Deer. She drew the pictures for this book. It'll say that right inside. And it was actually her sister-in-law, Esther Wilkin. They married brothers, Esther and Eloise, that wrote the book, and then Eloise did the pictures. Isn't that nice? So when I show you the pictures, you might see some similarities to the drawings of these two books because they're illustrated, not written by the same lady. Okay? Just a fun little fact that they were both, the author and the artist were very prolific. That means they wrote a lot of golden books. All right, let's get going. This book starts with George in school. When Georgie was 6, he started going to first grade. Just like Marcus is 6 and he'll be in first grade next year. He learned how to read, he learned how to print, and he learned how to add numbers. But he also learned that other children had something he didn't have. I wonder what that was. In this picture you can see now, if you notice, the desks are the old-fashioned kind that they had since, decades, long ways back, even into the 1800s. These old school desks which were all connected to each other. And there he is. You can see all the students around him, and he's standing up, Georgie, reading a book in class. Well, Georgie had toys, and he had books, and he even had an electric train. I'm going to show you this picture in a second. He had a tricycle, a bike to ride on, right? And he had a kitten and a Cocker Spaniel, which is a little doggy. So he had 2 pets, a cat and a dog. And he even had a television set. Now, that may not sound that unusual because a lot of people have them now, but this is the early 1950s, and some families are just getting television sets. Not everyone had one back then. So that was pretty exciting. But there was one thing, even though he had all these toys and he had a television set, here's the electric train tracks and the train. Here he's got some Indian or Native American headdress on, and here's his doggy and his kitty, boxing gloves, books, toys, everything. He has all these gifts and toys, but he didn't have a grandpa. He didn't have any grandpa at all. No grandpa. The boy who sat in front of Georgie in school had a grandpa who sent him oranges from Florida. Florida is where Disney World is, and remember, it's very warm down there, and so they have a lot of orange trees which need a lot of heat to grow. And so this boy was always happy to get a nice box full of oranges from his grandpa. The boy who sat beside Georgie had a grandpa who was really good at fixing toys. So whenever his toys got broken, this grandpa would fix them. So here's the little boy, and here's Georgie eating his lunch at his desk. Here's the little boy that has an orange from his grandpa, and here's the little boy next to him that's playing with a toy that apparently his grandpa had fixed for him when it got broken. And Georgie's best friend was always bringing picture books to school, some new fun books to share with people. And you know why? Because his grandpa had a bookstore. What fun. That'd be fun to have a grandpa with a bookstore. He's holding books. That's his friend with the glasses. And there's Georgie. Look at that coonskin hat. That used to be very popular in the 50s. There's another kind of hat that you don't see too much anymore. I love these older books with the different pictures and the way they dressed in their cars and all that stuff is so different from nowadays. Well, Georgie began to think of all the different kinds of nice grandpas there must be. If you could have a grandpa who worked in a bookstore, how about a grandpa who worked in a candy store? Ooh, that would be fun, right? Or how about a soda fountain? Now, maybe you're not sure what that is, but let's say it's a place where you can get ice cream. You used to have these in like drugstores where you could get your medicines and things. They'd have a long counter and a bunch of stools, and you'd sit up there and you'd order ice cream sundaes or some fizzy drink or banana splits or whatever. So here's a guy, a grandpa I should say, serving ice cream. And here's another thought. He said, what if you had a grandpa that had a toy store and there were all the different toys? That would be fun too. So Georgie's thinking about all these different kind of grandpas. Here's another kind. Or suppose you had a grandpa who was a farmer and he would let you drive the tractor. Woohoo! And look at that old tractor. I know Willa has a toy like that, and maybe the boys do too. And here, what if you had a grandpa that was a fireman, and that's an old fire truck, but still maybe they let you have a ride. Look at that. So he's just thinking in his mind about all the different kind of grandpas he could have and what they might be able to do and share with him. I had a grandpa that was a farmer, but I never got to ride a tractor with him. But how about a grandpa who was an airline pilot? Right here is kind of an old-looking interesting-looking airplane. Small little airplane. Or how about a grandpa that's a clown? And it would make you laugh all the time. We have a grandpa that tells jokes, so that's kind of close. Well, one day, a new boy came to Georgie's class, and that boy had two grandpas. A faraway grandpa who sent him letters and things in the mail, and a nearby grandpa who read stories to him at night. The grandpa must have lived nearby and could visit often. So here's that grandpa living nearby, reading him stories on his lap. And here's the other grandpa that lived far away, but he's got packages and letters, and he's putting them in the mailbox. Well, Georgie thought it was very unfair that everybody had grandpas except him. He wanted a grandpa more than anything else in the world. What could be more useful, he thought, and what could be more fun? Well, here he is thinking about it in his bedroom. Looks like he's in his underwear, getting ready for bed. There's his sweet little doggie by him, and his kitty's on the bed. Apparently he thought about this problem of no grandpa quite a bit, and he just was worrying about it and thinking about it and wishing for it. Well, he decided to take matters into his own hands. In other words, he's going to see what he can do about this grandpa problem. So the next morning was Saturday, so it was a day off of school. He took his wallet that still had his birthday dollar in it and walked down the road. And at the corner, there was an antique shop. And Mrs. McMath, the owner, saw Georgie and waved. Hi there. Where are you going so early?" she asked. "On a trip," said Georgie. "I'm out hunting for something." Here he is walking down the road in his warm fur hat. And it looks like his house is down there. So he walked way down the road and he sees the store lady. And here she is. She says, "Hi, what you doing?" And he said he's looking for something. And she said, well, come in here and get an apple to take along with you," said Mrs. McMath. And Georgie thought it would be a good idea to take an apple along in case he got hungry. He didn't know how long he was going to be out looking. So he went into the door of the shop with Mrs. McMath. "Georgie," said Mrs. McMath, as she gave him a nice red apple, "you've never been inside my shop. Wouldn't you like to see my antiques?" I don't know," said Georgie. "What are antiques anyway?" There he is walking in with her. She's already given him a nice red apple. And she's saying, come on in, I'll show you around. But he says, I don't even know what an antique is. Do you? Well, she said, why, anything that is very old is an antique. Things from way in the past that maybe your parents used when they were young or your grandparents used when they were young. Anything like that is getting it to be an antique. Well, in that case, said Georgie, I'll come in and look around. He's looking for who? What is he looking for? Remember, he's on a hunt and he's going to try to figure out this problem. He wants to find a grandpa. She said, anything that's very old is an antique. And she thought, grandpas are old. I don't know. Well, that's not exactly what they sell at antique stores. But let's see what Georgie found. If you look around the store, you can see that he found, oh, this is a stereoscope for looking at 3D pictures. Your parents can tell you about that. It's hard for me to look upside down, but there's a spinning wheel, and here's a butter churn. Oops, right. Wow, there it is. And something at the fire, a couple things at the fireplace that you don't see anymore for cooking. I think that is for popping corn over the fire right there. And there was lamps and chairs and and a wooden cradle for a baby. That's over here right behind Georgie. So all kinds of old things scattered throughout the store. I'm not going to point out every one of them, but they're very interesting. He thought they were interesting, but he didn't really need any of that. He didn't want it. So he kept walking, and he walked into the next room in the store. And there at the back of the shop, he saw an old man sitting in a rocking chair. The man had white hair and white eyebrows and nice blue eyes. He smiled at Georgie. And what do you think he was doing? Well, you'll never guess. He was making a tiny ship with a mast and 2 sails. So the mast is like the big pole that holds up the sails on an old ship from a long time ago that had sails on it. Before they had motors and engines and boats, sails, the wind blowing the sails is how the boats moved across the water. So he was making this beautiful old-fashioned small little boat, and when the ship was finished, the old man folded it together, and before Georgie could say, presto changeo, the ship was inside a bottle, sails and all. Now let's look at this picture. So there's Georgie walking in the room, and he's really taken by who is sitting over here, the older man that I told you about, and he's sewing and gluing and whatever he has to do. Looks like there's a string here because there's a kitty jumping at it, but he's making that beautiful ship I told you about, and then all of a sudden he put it in a bottle. Pretty tricky. Well, Georgie was pretty impressed. He walked back to Mrs. McNabb, and she said, well, did you see anything you liked? Yes, said Georgie, taking the dollar out of his wallet. I'll take that. And he was pointing behind him at the back of the shop. You mean you want the old rocking chair, said Mrs. McNabb. No, I mean I want that old grandpa, said Georgie. I'll take him home right now. Well, Mrs. McNabb laughed. Here's a picture of Georgie saying, I'll take that old grandpa. He's putting his thumb back to show her where he's direction. And there she's asking the question. So they're having a little talk like, you want that old grandpa? Oh, she said, that's my father. But you could have him after school and on Saturdays too. Said Georgie. Today is Saturday. And he walked back to the old man. The old man was busy making another ship to fit inside a bottle. That was his special hobby. He liked to do that. So here's Georgie coming back in. He's still quite fascinated by this man's skill at making ships and putting them in bottles. There's a bottle on the floor ready for him to put the next ship in, and there he is working on another one. Looks like a friendly guy, doesn't he? Well, Georgie walked up to him and he said, that's a nice ship. How come you make such good ships? Well, said the old man, I used to be a sea captain. I used to sail all over the world. "I'll bet you could tell a lot of good stories about ships and sailing," said Georgie. The old man put the ship down and got up to stretch his back. "Well," he said, "the only trouble is I haven't got anybody to tell stories to." "Well," said Georgie. He reached out his hand and they grasped each other's hands, and Georgie said, "You have now." Isn't that sweet? And he said, "I don't have anybody to tell stories to." Georgie said, "You do now." In other words, he would love to hear these stories. And there's the ship in the bottle. Isn't that amazing how it gets in there? It's bigger than the opening of the bottle. And there's the grandpa, and there's the little Georgie with his hat shaking hands. And they talked some more and agreed that he could be like his new grandpa for Georgie. And it made them both happy. They both needed, Georgie needed a grandpa, and the grandpa really wanted to help take care of a little boy and share his hobby with him. Well, Monday morning came and they were back in school, and the boy who sat in front of Georgie brought an orange from his grandpa's orange grove in Florida, and the boy who sat beside him brought in a car that his grandpa had fixed. And Georgie's best friend brought in some more picture books from his grandpa's store. But Georgie brought in something new. So here's the class and the teacher, and they're all looking at Georgie because what does he have? His new grandpa let him bring that beautiful ship in a bottle that he had made when Georgie was there. And Georgie was so proud to show it. "Where did you get such a beautiful ship?" asked the teacher. "And how did it get inside the bottle?" "My grandpa did it," said Georgie. "My grandpa can do lots of things." And he was so proud of that. Look at all the kids in the classroom are looking on and saying, "Ooh, that's pretty neat." And guess what? That's the end of the book. And there he is, proud as can be, with a big smile on his face, and his two front teeth are missing, and he's holding that special bottle. Boy, was he happy. He wanted a grandpa so bad, and there, unexpectedly, he found a man that was a little lonely and needed a little boy, and he needed a grandpa, and they became best friends. One more thing I'm going to show you. I actually have a ship in a bottle, so you can get an idea of what that looks like. Isn't that cool? My father-in-law, Grandpa's daddy, made this. This bottle has some pretty decorations of string around it to make it look sort of like a rope from a ship. And it's got a little cap or cork on the top, and here's the opening. And you can see the ship inside, and you think, how can a ship that is this big, and this one has 3 main sails and some shorter one at the helm of the ship, and it's supposed to look like it's in water. There's some like blue, I don't know, clay or something on the bottom there. Well, I guess the secret is in it, that it folds up first into this little teeny shape, and you're able to slide it in, and then it pops open when it gets inside. That's pretty tricky. And then you put the cap or the cork back on, and it looks like you did a magic trick. I have never seen anybody fold it up and put one in, but it is pretty cool to watch, I bet. And it's a neat souvenir, too. Lots of people will talk about it. And this Georgie was so proud of that. I bet he learned how to do it. I bet that grandpa taught him how. Well, that's the end of the story. Georgie finds a grandpa, and he did find a wonderful grandpa. God provided. Okay, loves. See you later.